in LA, so I think I'll wait till later tonight. Well, good morning, everyone, and welcome to TTMA's first virtual event of 2021. I'd like to thank Adam Burke, our guest speaker, who will be providing us with insights on the forecast here in Los Angeles, as well as taking some time for our community to get to know who he is. As I do, I'm sure most of you wish that we could be seeing each other in person. However, I'm grateful that we're still able to continue to meet virtually until that day comes. 2020 was a true test of our patience, strength, and commitment to our industry and organization. As we worked to maneuver through a global pandemic, TTMA also experienced our first year without a full-time executive director. Thanks to our wonderful board and our incredible new administrator, we were able to move through rocky waters successfully and still manage to advance the organization moving forward. Last year, we were forced to make the transition to virtual events, which allowed us to provide unique speaker presentations and continue to increase the exposure of TTMA. With the help of our amazing board and our valued members and friends, this coming year should build on that same momentum. And if you haven't already, if you guys don't mind muting yourselves, that would be awesome. I don't think any of us could imagine that we would still be experiencing restrictions, closures, and heartache with COVID almost a year later. However, it's exciting to see movement in a positive direction with the stay-at-home restrictions lifted a couple of weeks ago and a slow rollout of the vaccine that has begun. I will continue to say this each month. We are all in this together, and we want you to know that TTMA will continue to support any of our members and community to the best ability we can. We are hoping that today's program will shed some light on the positive things to come in 2021. TTMA would like to take a moment to extend a heartfelt thanks to the 2020 board for all of their hard work last year. And we are fortunate that most have elected to continue their service in 2021. However, we are sad to say goodbye to Maritza Serrano, Mary Carley, and Serge Abnousi. We are so grateful for all of their many contributions. TTMA would like to honor their hard work and commitment for their years of service. It is now my honor to recognize the newly elected 2021 TTMA board, including our new board members joining us this year. Brian Schwan with South Coast Plaza, Jeff Levy with Where Traveler and Guestbook and Performances Magazine, Manny Garcia with The Garland, Mariela Carmona with Convac, Patrick Tabora with the all-new SoFi Stadium, and Wendy Keel with Tourism Insights. We are so excited to bring on such a large number of new board members. Welcome to all of you. We are looking forward to a wonderful 2021 working together to continue to strengthen and grow TTMA. As it is a tradition, I'd like to begin this program with introductions of all of the attendees. Obviously, we can't go around the Zoom and do that, so we're going to use the chat. But before doing so, I'd like to acknowledge our newest members, SoFi Stadium and Convac. Now, please feel free to use the chat to say hello to your colleagues, introduce yourself, and share any message that you'd like to for the next few minutes. If you are a guest of TTMA or this is your first TTMA event, please let us know as well. I'm going to mute myself and you guys can take away.
I'll kick it off. Hey, everyone. Thank you, Sarah. I'm Patrick Tabora with SoFi Stadium Tours and Events. I was previously with SkySpace LA for the past 3.5 years, and I just joined on this past November. So I'll be overseeing the tourism sales for SoFi Stadium Tours and Events, and glad to be with TTMA.
Thanks, Patrick. And sorry if I miscommunicated. We're actually going to use the chat, but thank you for your introduction. We don't have time to use everybody, but and I apologize, Wendy, for that. That's tourism economics, not insights. It's awesome. It looks like we have a wide range of people visiting us from all over Southern California and elsewhere. So very excited. And thank you to all of our board members for joining us as well. I see we have Omar. This is great. A lot of faces that I haven't seen in a long time. Visit California. This is awesome. And Adam, you are going to be up next after the chat, but we'll have time to transition. Just giving you a FYI.
All right. Thanks, Sarah.
I think if we took time to go around, we'd probably use up the whole hour, but this is great. And hopefully one day we'll be in person and we can do that face to face soon enough. This picture on this slide is actually from one of our awards luncheon. Yeah, those were the days we could be face to face without masks. Pretty incredible. I love that Ashley gets to join us all the way from across the United States. That's the one benefit of Zoom and virtual. Nobody has to get in a car and drive. I know I was able to drive my daughter to be on campus for 2.5 hours at her school, and cumulatively I was in the car for an hour and a half, and I said, I don't know if I missed this, but.
Yeah, it's been an interesting, we have a college freshman who is upstairs for the whole year. He's supposed to be in DC, and instead they've gone virtual for the whole year. So it's been an interesting freshman year for him.
I bet. Well, thank you so much. I think we will begin our program now. So Misha, if you want to stop sharing and Adam can take over, please help me in welcoming Adam Burke, President and CEO of the Los Angeles Tourism and Convention Board.
Thanks, Sarah. I really so appreciate the opportunity to just meet with everyone today. I mean, it's nice to see so many friends and colleagues, and nice to connect with some people who I haven't had the pleasure of working with yet. And Sarah, I really just want to echo what you said. You know, I think if there is a huge silver lining that's come out of 2020 and the pandemic, it's I have seen such incredible collaboration across our industry. And I think that's one of those things that, you know, I definitely want to see us continue moving forward. I think it's brought us all closer together. And there's no question that, you know, the way we've been able to manage through this as an LA travel and tourism community is by locking arms and really helping to support each other. So I really appreciate the opportunity to spend some time with you this morning. One of the things that Sarah had suggested is that because I haven't had the opportunity to meet you all, you know, Zoom for, you know, all of its advantages, I think we would all agree is absolutely no substitute for being in person. I think that's actually very good news. If you look at the future of, you know, the group side of the business and small meetings and any number of other things, I think there's only so much we can do by transacting through a computer screen. So one of the things Sarah had suggested was we spend a little bit of time just giving you an opportunity to get to know a little bit more about me personally, as well as my background. But I think as a jumping off point, I would be horribly remiss if I did not acknowledge something, which is when I talk about big shoes to fill, I think we have been incredibly blessed over the last 8 years to have a singularly extraordinary leader in Ernie Wooden. This is the second time in my career that I've had the privilege of serving under Ernie's leadership. And I think normally I'm not a big believer in reading what's on the screen, but you may know that Ernie, along with Joe D'Alessandro, were inducted into U.S. Travel's Hall of Leaders this year. I'll say that's also a phenomenal reflection on California, because it's very atypical that you see two recipients from one state. But I want to share what Mayor Eric Garcetti actually wrote in his nomination for Ernie to be added to the Hall of Leaders. He said, Ernie has been an ambassador of the Angelino spirit and a champion of the values and voices that make us proud to call Los Angeles home. He helped transform our tourism industry into an engine of our economy, shared our story with the world, and deepened our city's identity as a destination for dreamers, doers, visitors, and visionaries from across the globe. I can't think of a better way of summing it up. You know, Ernie is, I think, so highly regarded in not just LA, but across the global travel and tourism industry. And I think the biggest reason is not just because he's been an extraordinary leader, but because he is quite simply a man of extraordinary character. I think every one of us who have had the privilege of working for and with Ernie know that he has the absolute highest integrity, and he has really helped elevate Los Angeles around the world. So I think it would be remiss not to start by saying we owe a huge debt of gratitude to what Ernie has done during his tenure. One of the things Sarah and I had talked about is perhaps one of the easiest ways to quickly get to know a little bit about me is to have a little fun with this, because, you know, part of the inherent limitation of Zoom, we don't get to do some of the things we might normally do if we have a chance to meet together in person, particularly over drinks. So, you know, as you said, Sarah, maybe a little bit early for that, but we're going to go through for a few minutes 3 truths and a lie to give you a bit of a chance to get to know more about me. So the first question is, of these 4 statements, 1 is a lie, 3 are accurate. So I have lived in Chicago, Maui, London, and Colorado. And if you want to put it into the chat, you're welcome to. I'm curious to know, of these 4, which one do you think is the lie? What is the place I have not lived? I see some guesses here. I see Maui, Colorado, London, Maui. So the answer is, I've actually been incredibly fortunate that we did get to live in Maui for about 5 years. I'm actually a native Chicagoan, grew up there, went to school in Colorado, down in Colorado Springs. What you see there is Garden of the Gods, which is this incredible rock formation there. And I actually come out of the hotel side of the business. I spent over 25 years in the hotel side. And after I worked for a company that I won't mention because it's going to be a question in a minute, and I actually had the opportunity to work for a nonprofit in Maui. And I will tell you, it was completely a lifestyle-driven decision. I think all of us work extraordinarily hard at what we do because we love what we do. But at that time, we had a 4-year-old and a 7-year-old. And in my current job at that point, I was traveling easily a third of the year. And candidly, I did not want to wake up and be sending kids off to college knowing that I blinked and I missed it. So for about 5 years, we lived in Maui, which is just an amazing place to raise young kids. And, you know, although I worked quite hard, I quite literally did not have to get on a plane for a business trip the entire time we lived there. So it gave me the opportunity to volunteer at my kids' schools and chaperone field trips and get involved with more volunteering in the community. Phenomenal experience. What I will say is, you know, Maui is just a magical place, but it is also extraordinarily expensive. So as the kids got older and they were approaching high school years, we knew there were just going to be more opportunities for them back here in LA. But I am incredibly grateful for having spent 5 years in paradise. So the next question, I think one of the things that makes LA such an incredibly unique destination is our incredible diversity. And I think that is something that around the world has really resonated with people. Whenever we do primary research, and Wendy and Chelsea have certainly been involved in this, one of the things we find is that LA is more about a state of mind than about any particular product or service. There's no question that one of the things that makes us so successful is that we do have, I think, virtually everything under the sun that a visitor could want. But I think really it's about a feeling that LA is one of those places where you can bring your whole self. And the diversity of our community is really part of that. If you think about it, you know, we speak over 200 different languages in LA. We don't have any one dominant racial or ethnic group. And I think that's really reflective across our culinary scene, our arts and cultural community, virtually everything we do. So in terms of my background, again, 3 truths and a lie. My family is Italian, Dutch, Canadian, Polish. One of these is a lie. So again, if you want to use the chat, I'm curious to know, which do you think is the lie? I see Canadian, Italian, Dutch, Polish. So the answer to this one is I am Italian by marriage and by food preference, but not in terms of my family background. My mom actually emigrated from the Netherlands when she was about 16. My father's family is from Poland and settled in Canada, so I actually have dual citizenship. I'm one of the lucky ones who I actually am able to maintain both the U.S. and a Canadian passport. In terms of my family's experience, I can't tell you how amazed I am by the internet. My wife was actually nosing around because she is the family genealogist, loves doing ancestry, and actually was able to find the ship's manifest from 1946 that shows my mom and her mother coming to the US. And it's literally the original handwritten ship's manifest. One of the questions on it, which I thought was remarkable, is, do you have at least $50? And what they were trying to figure out at the time when people were, immigrating to the US was, were they able to support themselves, or perhaps were they going to be indigent when they came here? And through that, I found out I actually have an uncle in Kew Gardens, New York, who I never knew existed. So the internet's quite a remarkable thing. So moving on, some of you probably know some of these about me, but in terms of what I like to do in my free time, particularly when we're allowed to do these things, of these four, are my hobbies playing ice hockey as well as attending Kings games, my favorite team, actually performing in community theater productions, playing golf, or playing piano. So these four, again, one is a lie. Curious to see what you think it is. Oh, you guys have me pretty well nailed on this one. So you are right. I occasionally try to play golf. The most charitable thing that can be said about my golf game is I know when to pick up my ball. I know from those of you who do golf, the most important thing is not to slow the speed of play. So I think the two mistakes I made is, first of all, someone had to inform me that high score does not win. It took me a while to figure that out. And the second thing is I usually prefer to think of golf as I want to get my money's worth. So I don't just use one fairway. For my tee shot, I try to use every fairway possible. So I guess it's fair to say you do not ever want to invite me out to a round. But you probably picked up, being half Canadian. I spent a lot of time in Canada growing up for hockey tournaments and hockey camps. I am an absolute diehard Kings fan. I will tell you that last year, the last full season, my daughter and I actually had a pretty remarkable experience. She is an avid fan of one of the players, Alex Iafallo, who, if you follow the Kings at all, it doesn't hurt that he is, as she would say, pretty darn cute. So, but that said, she's also become an avid fan. I'll come home at times and she'll be watching the Kings game all by herself. But she voted in their annual fan balloting for who her favorite player was. I'm fairly certain she got Alex Iafallo to be named the player of the year all on her own. I think she must have voted some 10,000 times. But she texted me one day and was pretty much freaking out and said, "Is this real?" Well, the long story short is she won the fan balloting contest, which gave her the right for the Kings' last home game of the year to actually go down on the ice, center ice at Staples Center with me. And what the Kings do at the end of every season, and it's a wonderful tradition, is they have season ticket holders and fans who win contests. Every one of the Kings players literally takes the jersey off their back, autographs it, and hands it to one of the lucky fans. So, we're at this point pretty amazed that we're standing at center ice at Staples Center, and we're toward the end of the line, and they give you an envelope that says what player you're matched with, and you're not allowed to open it until they get to you, and the PA announcer for Staples Center tells you to open your envelope. Well, we go down the list, and we see all of these other players being named, and I have no idea how this happened, but she actually got Alex Iafallo. So I have these wonderful pictures of what can only be described as absolute hero worship of my 16-year-old daughter looking up at Alex Iafallo completely doe-eyed. And, you know, that is one of those memories that I will always treasure. Theater, that actually is something I did all the way through high school and college. Stopped doing it for a while. And when we moved to Maui, the nonprofit I worked for actually was a performing arts nonprofit. We did educational performing arts throughout the school system in Hawaii, as well as educational programming in dance, drama, music. And, you know, that gave me the opportunity when my son was cast in a show to get the theater bug again. And I started doing some community theater again. And piano is one of those things that I've done since I was probably about 5 or 6 years old. Regrettably, I love playing, but hate practicing. So I hit a ceiling pretty early on, but at least I can, you know, strike out a tune and do have a piano at home. So they're kind of related to that, because I did get back into community theater. I had the opportunity during my time on Maui to perform in 3 of these 4 shows. So curious to know, which of these do you think I did not perform in? And again, I'll take an eye on the chat. Oklahoma, Godspell, Oklahoma, Les Mis. Okay, some of you got this one nailed. So the answer is, I did not sing about the prairies of Oklahoma. I had the opportunity to participate in the 3 shows you see here. And all of that I actually owe to my son. When we moved there, he got the theater bug big time. And in fact, he went to a high school for the performing arts down in Orange County School of the Arts. And he is now going to be at George Washington double majoring in theater and political science. But he was cast in South Pacific, and I had the chance to join him on stage. So, you know, for me, again, in terms of life memories, being able to do a show with your son is a pretty cool experience. Also, Godspell and Les Mis. And Les Mis, I got the best of both worlds, because I'll tell you, you know, I'm one of those people who, if you get a drink in me and a microphone at a karaoke bar, I'll go all night. But in terms of carrying an entire show on your shoulders, that's an awful lot. So I get the best of both worlds for Les Mis, because the role of Jean Valjean is such a heavy singing role, and it really requires someone with true operatic training. We did bring in someone who is a professional singer from Oahu, but he wasn't able to join us until about 3 weeks before opening night. So I actually was the understudy for Valjean, and for about 3 months, I got to play the role in all of the rehearsals and then hand it off to a professional singer. So I had none of the pressure of being on stage as the lead. And honestly, some people really like that spotlight. For me, I was perfectly happy being revolutionary number 3. But again, Nathan, my son, was also in that show as the street urchin. So we got to do a couple shows together when we were in Maui. And one of the things I love about LA, we have such an incredible arts and cultural community. I think it's one of the hidden gems. If you think about our culinary community, you know, you go back about 10 years and LA just was not getting its due, right? If you look at the top food lists, you always saw New York, San Francisco, Chicago. And thanks to a lot of people across our community, particularly Susan Feniger and Mary Sue Milliken, we really moved the needle. And now LA is at the top of everyone's food lists. In a lot of ways, I feel like that's where we are with our arts and cultural community. One of the things a lot of people may not realize is that LA actually boasts more performing arts centers and performing venues and museums than any city in the US. Again, more performing arts venues and museums than any city, including New York. But I think that's one of those things people don't know enough about. So a lot like we were able to move the needle on Dine LA, we are going to really be pushing our arts and cultural community as we come through the recovery process. So I think, you know, all of us have interesting and varied backgrounds on the work front. Of these 4 jobs, which one do you think I have not done? And by the way, I'll tell you, you know, my wife, if she was down here, would be mortified, because some of these are ones that I'm not supposed to be telling people. which of course means I always tell people. But of these four, which one do you think I have not done over the years? And yes, Sarah, I agree with you. We need a karaoke outing. Absolutely. I see line cook, ski instructor, vacuum salesman. A lot of people don't think I was a line cook. And, I guess if you see our credit card bill every month and how much we're using delivery services, I can understand why you think that. But the reality is, I actually was not a ski instructor. So number one, yeah, probably a little bit of a gimme that I'm a hockey fanatic. So in college, I actually was a Zamboni driver. One of the things that probably scarred me for life is I did try to be a walk-on player at a Division I school. Not recommended. You probably can't tell from this, but if you know me personally, I'm not a really big guy. And I tried to walk on, and scholarship players don't tend to take too kindly to that. So it was a very painful learning experience, but I did end up being the Zamboni driver for the rink and ended up making ice for the players who I was trying to make the team with. So that was a rather interesting experience. But the highlight of that is I actually got to make ice at the rink when the U.S. Olympic team in Colorado Springs was training at our rink. So some of the medalists from the U.S. figure skating team, I actually got to drive Zamboni for them. Ski instructor, I think it'd be charitable to call what I do skiing. So I don't think anyone wants to learn with me. My skiing is probably on par with my golf game. But actually, I have worked every job in a restaurant other than barback and bartender. I've been a prep chef, I've been a line cook, I've been a host, I've been a busboy, I've been a waiter. I actually think everyone should be required at some point in their life to work in a restaurant, because it will teach you more about hospitality and service than just about any business I know. I also have a bias that I think you can tell a lot about a person by how they treat the staff in a restaurant. People who are not kind to service workers, that tends to be a fundamental character flaw in my book. So, working as a line cook was such a fun experience because you got to be part of a team, and it gave me a real appreciation for, some of the hardest working people in our industry are the ones who are behind the scenes. And yes, this is one of those embarrassing facts that I'm not supposed to tell you, but in college, I was a Kirby vacuum cleaner salesman door to door. We'll just let that one sit where it is. But I think if you can sell vacuum cleaners door to door, you can sell pretty much anything. So kind of getting more specific about our industry, I've been fortunate to work with a lot of different companies over the years. Which of these four chains did I not work for at some point in my career? I see IHG, Four Seasons, so pretty much IHG and Four Seasons. So the answer on this one is I never had the pleasure of working for IHG. I worked for Hyatt very early in my career. I think like a lot of people who come out of college with a liberal arts degree, I feel like I got a great education, and I did not have the first clue what the hell I wanted to do for a living. So I went to work in Chicago for Deloitte in their management consulting practice. And my goal was really just to get exposure to as many industries as I could. And that is where I first got the travel bug. Hyatt was one of my first clients. And working with Hyatt is really what convinced me that working in the travel and tourism industry was the space I wanted to be in. Over the years, I actually worked as a banquet server at Four Seasons. Again, I think that teaches you an awful lot about the service industry. And I spent most of my career prior to Los Angeles tourism with Hilton Worldwide. I was with Hilton for a little over 17 years. That's where I had the privilege of working for Ernie. During the last 5 years I was there, I had global responsibility for the Hilton Honors loyalty program. And that's really where I developed a passion for the international side of the business, particularly as someone who is first generation American. I had the opportunity when I was quite little to travel a lot with my family. But when I really started to travel extensively with Hilton internationally, that's really where I realized there's so much to see out there. And I think, again, the good news for our industry coming out of the year of the pandemic is that there is massive pent-up demand. In fact, some of the interesting research that's come out from organizations like Psychology Today, people are actually becoming clinically depressed over the fact that they haven't been able to travel. And even the simple act of planning a trip, they have found can elevate people's mood and help combat pandemic fatigue and depression. So, we've had a rough year, but I think the best way of saying it is what Adam Sachs from Tourism Economics says: the recovery is inevitable. People are always going to want to travel. And I think it's the thing that really brings us all together. So I have great optimism for the future of our industry. So kind of shifting gears from getting to know you, I wanted to spend the rest of our time really talking about why I think there is every reason to be incredibly optimistic about 2021 and beyond. The way we really thought about it is managing for recovery. So some of you may have seen this if you've attended some of our member webinars. Really when we were a few months into the pandemic, we realized we had to take our 3-year strategic plan and stick it in a drawer for a while. And I think all of us have had to be incredibly agile. We've had to be incredibly responsive to rapidly changing market dynamics. So really, we've thought about this in 3 phases. The first is stabilization. I think the thing we all needed to do very early on was make sure that we could support each other through this so that we all had the staying power to outlast the recovery. I think if you had asked all of us back in maybe March, April, whether we would still be dealing with this in 2021, I think a lot of us would have hoped that it would have been largely over by now. So when we look at stabilization, it really is what can we do as a nonprofit organization to support our members and our stakeholders. One of the key things here we did is early in the pandemic, we actually suspended all membership dues for 2020. And I'm pleased to share that, unfortunately, because of the surge we all experienced at the end of the year, I know that a lot of your businesses are still hurting. So in case you haven't already seen this, we've made the decision to continue waiving membership dues through June of this year. And that's one of the things we can do to help hopefully stabilize you from a financial perspective. Preparation has really been about making sure that we still have the resources to be competitive. And I'm going to talk about that more in a second, but I think that is one of LA's key competitive advantages. We, like a lot of you, had to make some very difficult decisions at the beginning of the pandemic, particularly with regard to staffing. And I will say, we have some absolutely exceptional people on this call today who, through absolutely no fault of their own, we had to reduce our staffing by roughly 2/3. And I think that's probably, we've all been through workforce reductions over the years, but that is the single most difficult thing I've ever gone through professionally. I think we all work so hard to try and build outstanding teams. And, to this day, I have such tremendous respect and admiration and honestly affection for all of our former teammates because they did an outstanding job. And, the reality for us was simply this. Los Angeles Tourism as a nonprofit derives roughly 86% of its revenues from hotel stays. In addition to that, our contract with Los Angeles World Airports adds another 3 to 4%. So the situation we found ourselves in was that 90% of our revenue pretty much dried up overnight. So I'm incredibly grateful to our former team members for everything they contributed, because what I will say is while it was devastating for us to lose such phenomenal teammates, all of the work that you did over the years contributing to LA tourism is what put us in a position to be one of the top global destinations, and honestly to be in a position to manage through the recovery process. So, to all of you who are on the phone today who are former team members of LA Tourism, I just want to extend a huge thank you to all of you and just my sincere gratitude. And I firmly believe that whether it's in another role with another organization or maybe even back with LA Tourism at some point down the road, I know we will all have the opportunity to continue collaborating. And then in terms of recovery, I think we have to acknowledge this process has not been linear. When we entered the recovery process, there was a lot of speculation. Was this going to be a V-shaped recovery? Well, clearly not. Was it going to be a U-shape? Was it going to be an elongated U? And I think the reality is it's been more like Six Flags Magic Mountain, right? We've had a few steps forward, a few steps back, a few up, a few down, a few sideways. This has been anything but linear, and I know that's been incredibly challenging for everyone here. So what we're really looking at, and Wendy during her time with the organization, and certainly Chelsea has done a phenomenal job really stepping in and building on the foundation that Wendy established, is we continue to try and be as data-driven in everything we do, and I think that's more important now than ever. And when we look at what is the right timing to really be back in the market, we're really looking at consumer confidence as being the primary barometer for that. I think part of the reason that's so important is there are other destinations who I will freely acknowledge were in the market much earlier than we were. And I will say, having talked to some of my colleagues, candidly, they regret that because they were out in the market spending dollars at a time where consumer sentiment did not support that people were ready to start actively traveling again. And in a number of instances, they really wish they had that funding back. Instead, based on the data that Chelsea provides and under the leadership of Don Schio, who is our Chief Marketing Officer, and he's built just a world-class team, we've really looked at consumer sentiment and confidence in terms of, do people feel safe traveling? Do they have the financial resources to travel? And more importantly, are they allowed to travel? So these are really three of the key drivers for us. Part of the reason this is so important is obviously there's limited funding to go around. So we want to make sure if we're going to spend on marketing recovery, that we do so as intelligently as possible. And a great example is we were ready to launch our Drive Market campaign in Phoenix and Las Vegas just around the time they spiked significantly in hospitalizations and case counts. One of the things that I give tremendous credit to our marketing team for is they have made sure that all of our media is cancelable or movable. We are not locked into anything, and that gave us the flexibility to hit the pause button and not go into Vegas and Phoenix at a time where that money would not have been well spent. Beyond that, I think we've got to talk about the elephant in the room, which is this is all about our demand drivers. I'll say this as someone who, as you know, spent almost 20 years in the hotel side of the business. And some of you who know me, you've heard me say this before. I don't wake up in the morning and look at my wife and say, you know what, hon, this spring break, let's take the kids to the LAX Airport Hilton. We don't make decisions that way, right? The decision is, am I going to go to Chicago or New York or LA or London or Barcelona? So fundamentally, it's about making sure that we elevate the destination globally to make sure that when people are looking at where they're going to plan their next trip, that LA is consistently top of mind. And I think one of the things that the pandemic has made abundantly clear is that it really is about the demand drivers. What you see here are the 6 things that really represent our core product pillars as a destination. Unless it's a resort like Terranea or Canyon Ranch, where yes, people may choose to go there because of that resort. Mostly what they're looking for is things you see here. It's our sports and entertainment scene, sports and live venue entertainment. It's our culinary scene. It's shopping and retail. It's all of our arts and cultural attractions. It's outdoor and wellness. 300 days of sunshine is kind of hard to beat. And, not to put too fine a point on it, right about the time that we're really starting to recover, it's going to be really cold in some parts of the country. So sometimes I'd rather be lucky than smart. And the last one is certainly all of our major theme parks and attractions. If you look at the demand drivers, there is literally no destination, I would say, not just nationally, but on the planet, that boasts the full range of options that LA has. 2 sides to this coin, though. When I talked about the fact that, the elephant in the room is, we all need to acknowledge that there are sectors of our business that remain closed or remain, open with very strict capacity controls. And I will tell you that Patty McJanet, who's on the phone with us today, has been doing an extraordinary job of working, and you'll see in a moment, with the county's Economic Resiliency Task Force to really advocate on behalf of every sector, because I think the thing we should acknowledge is, I think public health has done the best possible job they can in an impossible situation, right? There is really nothing in our lifetime that informs what's the right way of doing this. And I think if we look at some of the destinations that have perhaps been more aggressive in reopening, we've seen them have to grind to a screeching halt because they've had a significant spike in case counts. But that said, what we are really looking to do is continue partnering with public health to educate people about the nature of our business, and that so much of what we do actually represents some of the most controlled environments that are out there. So I think as a basis for comparison, and I don't say this as a critique at all, because I think working in public health right now is just, a no-win situation. But that said, if you look at the fact that you could have perhaps 100 people in a movie theater, and again, I like to personalize it, a movie theater, a shopping mall, well, who works in a movie theater? It's a lot of high school kids. I will tell you, as much as I love him, I do not trust my 18-year-old with health and safety protocols and my safety. As opposed to, let's say we have a small meeting of 50 to 100 people. Well, if you compare those environments, at a meeting, we know exactly who is coming. We can actually dictate safety protocols. We have trained professionals, including certified meeting planners and hotel staff, who for decades have been implementing quality assurance protocols and know how to do this right. And we can even do things like contact tracing and rapid testing on site. So I think what we're really doing is leaning in now that the case counts have started to come down materially, to partnering at the county and state level to make sure that we're not asking for special consideration. What we're asking for is equitable consideration. Because I think across our culinary community, museums, theme parks, small meetings, we clearly can deliver the right safety protocols to ensure a safe and responsible guest experience. So we're very well aware of the fact that without our demand drivers, we can't have a full recovery. I mentioned a moment ago the Economic Resiliency Task Force. So this has really been the key medium in which we've been able to advocate. And what you see here is the goal is really to have public policy be informed by the expertise of those within our industry. And there are a number of people, whether it be Karen Irwin from Universal Studios Hollywood, who is on the group representing sports and large venue entertainment, whether it be Patty McJanet and Javier Cano, who are working on the restaurants and hospitality group, people like Lori Bettison Varga from Natural History Museum working on arts and culture. This has really been the forum in which we've been able to effectively advocate that we can implement the right protocols and start to get these sectors reopened. One of the questions has been, why have we hit the pause button the last couple of months? And I think the honest answer to that is that if you look at us having 0% ICU capacity, it would have seemed completely tone deaf for us to be actively advocating for the reopening of these sectors until those case counts came down, until hospital capacity started to go back up again. The good news is that is absolutely the trend line. So many people in our industry and a lot of you on this call are playing an instrumental role in making sure that public policy is informed by industry expertise. One of the things I want to show you in case you haven't seen this, we actually did this both for travel trade, but also for consumers, was we put together a video that really is designed to show that it is possible to honor all of the safety protocols and still have a very positive Los Angeles experience. So I'm just going to play this briefly, and this will give you a sense of the way we're positioning it. You'll see that healthy safety is right there front and center, but not in a way that's beating you over the head with it. And Chelsea can tell you that, depending on the market, this is something that was very important early in the recovery process. So I'm going to roll this video for you. Are you able to hear this? Because I'm not hearing it on my end. If you can put in the chat whether you're able to hear this. Great, thank you. So Alicia, I'm sure you recognize where we filmed a good chunk of that. The original farmers market was terrific in partnering with us on that. But, I think the goal is to strike a balance. We don't want to be too heavy-handed. But by the same token, I think, people are looking to have confidence that when they come here, they can have a safe experience. And you'll notice that one of the taglines that we use on every piece of creative right now is the hashtag travel responsibly. And that's to communicate not only to our partners at the county and state level that we as an industry are committed to safety, but also honestly to let visitors know when they come here, there are certain expectations and certain protocols that need to be followed. So one of the things we've done on our website, we actually, for all of our members, have a link to all of their safety protocols so that both locals and visitors coming from outside of the market know exactly what to expect before they come here. So one of the things I want to speak to specifically, because it affects so many different parts of our industry, and a lot of you on the call today, is we know that we need to continue to actively work to reopen the meeting sector. There are a couple of things that are important about this. We're really taking a three-pronged strategy. One is to talk about the protocols, and I will tell you the protocols that have been developed by these working groups have been incredibly well received by public health. So I think they do see that we've been very vigilant in developing the right protocols. The second thing is recognizing that this needs to be a graduated reopening process. We've been quite intentional about separating meetings from conventions and trade shows, because for obvious reasons right now, public health does not want to hear about a 10,000 person event. So our goal is to get a graduated reopening starting with small meetings, moving up to mid-size, and then hopefully toward the end of the year, getting back to the convention side of the business. But the third part is worth talking about for a second, because when we talk about jobs and economic impact, one of the things that surprised us is there really hadn't been a true economic impact study done on how valuable meetings and conventions are to California. So I think some of these numbers are just incredibly important to have in our back pocket. So first of all, when I talk about separating the conversation about meetings from conventions and trade shows, Lynn Moorfeld and the team at CHLA have been working very closely with a variety of people here. Again, Javier Cano from the Tourism Marketing District, certainly Heather Rosman, the team at Hala, Patty McJennett's been working very closely with this group, and then also all the local hotels and event venues. CHLA is really taking the lead at the state level, because remember, any county can only be more restrictive, not less restrictive than what state public health mandates. So we have to be able to make a compelling business case at the state level, and at the same time advocate locally, because county health officials are going to be partnering with state to make sure they feel that LE is ready. And then Barb Newton and the team over at Cal Travel and the Convention Center Coalition are continuing to work on what can we do to develop a plan to safely reopen our centers. But when you look at the economic impact, I think it's just staggering to talk about the economic value that meetings and separately conventions and trade shows represent in California. This is all based on Oxford Economics. Los Angeles, San Diego, Anaheim, and San Francisco actually commissioned this study with Oxford Economics. And if you look at it, in 2019, there was close to $44 billion in direct spending from meetings alone. This does not include conventions and trade shows. If you look at the total economic output associated with that, it's almost $85 billion. That represents about $3.5 billion in state and local taxes. And candidly, the most important thing to me is that the meeting sector supports 300,000 plus direct jobs. And in 2019, 517,000 total jobs. I think, that's one of the things that's most critical as we talk about recovery. It's about getting Angelenos back to work. I'm sure you've heard some of these stats before, but pre-pandemic, just looking across our industry broadly, not just meetings, we employed over 544,000 Angelenos in tourism-related careers. Sadly, that number has now fallen. We've lost about 1 in 3 jobs in our sector. And I think the most important part of reopening is getting people back to work. We then shift gears to conventions and trade shows. It adds another $22 billion in direct spending, another $44 billion in total economic output, another couple $2 billion in taxes, and again, another 250,000 total jobs. So this is information we haven't had historically. And I'll tell you that we've been working with the team at Oxford Economics. we've actually commissioned the exact same study for Los Angeles. So we will shortly have this exact same data on Los Angeles. I think that's going to be incredibly important as Patty and Heather Osmond and Lynn Moorfeld and Javier Cano all work along with Darren Green, our head of sales. You know, Darren has been an absolute champion in advocating for the voice of customer in this and making sure that we understand what we need to do to safely reopen the meeting sector. This is going to be an incredibly important part of that argument, is look at the economic impact, but look at the employment data. The reason I mention all this is I want to show you one of the things that we've always hypothesized throughout this is that because we have been so judicious in how we have managed our operating budgets, and because of the way we've managed for recovery, we fully expected that because some competitive destinations either had to go dark or maybe went out into the market too early, that we would be in a position to actually take market share as we came through the recovery process. Now, you know, a couple of things to make clear here. One is, I never thought I'd see the day where I would be excited about 50% hotel occupancy. You know, that's a rather bizarre place to be. But I think we have to recognize that this is a journey we're all on. So if you look at 2019, you can see this was pretty typical. You know, generally, if you look at, you know, occasionally we would break the medal stand, but really New York, Oahu, San Francisco had the highest occupancy. And one thing to point out here, this is adjusted occupancy. That was less relevant in 2019 because everyone had their rooms available and in service. But if you look at 2020, there were times where LA County had as many as 90 to 100 hotels that were closed indefinitely. So when we look at LA relative to competitive markets, what we have to look at is not just the raw occupancy, but what the occupancy would have been if every market had all of their rooms in service. Because obviously the fewer rooms you have in service, the easier it is to get a higher level of occupancy. So when I said that our belief was we'd be in a position to steal market share, that has absolutely come to fruition. If you look at the data that Chelsea put together, and this is based on STR, for 2020, and you look at the adjusted occupancy that takes into account what would have happened if everyone had their full room supply available, Los Angeles actually jumped one full place into the bronze medal position where we had 45.2% adjusted occupancy for the year. Now, if you look above that, I think you'll note that when you look at Tampa, St. Pete, and Phoenix, there are a couple things to say about that. Number one, those were a couple of the markets that were most aggressive about reopening. They're also predominantly outdoor markets, but most importantly, they have a much smaller amount of room supply than Los Angeles does. If you want to contextualize it, Tampa, St. Pete has about 48,000 rooms. Phoenix has about 60,000. Los Angeles has 106,000. So if you think about it, with a market that has twice the supply, we're pretty darn close on adjusted occupancy. And again, you know, this is not something to celebrate because I think we all want to support our colleagues across the country. But if you look at where New York, San Francisco, and Oahu fell to in terms of adjusted occupancy, LA is significantly outperforming our major competitive set. So again, you know, 45% adjusted occupancy, nothing to write home about. When you look at it, it is absolutely true that LA is outperforming our major competitors. So what I want to close with today is really talking about, you know, why I am still bullish on the fact that we have every reason to be incredibly optimistic about LA's continuing recovery. The first thing is, I think we've got to talk about financial stability. One thing you may not be aware of is we actually, and I give huge credit to Patty McJennett for work she's done with the city on this, we actually obtained a contract renewal. Our contract for services as the official destination marketing and sales organization for the city of Los Angeles expired this past June. And, you know, through Patty's efforts, we were actually able to secure a 10-year renewal. Again, a 10-year renewal. You know, that is incredibly significant in terms of the stability of our organization and our ability to continue promoting the destination. One of the fundamental reasons for that, we'll talk about it in a second, is if you look at the incredible calendar of events that we've got on the books already for the rest of the decade, coupled with the fact that we are still managing through the recovery process, having that stability is critical. But the second thing, and I think honestly, this is probably the single biggest competitive differentiator for us. You may know that the Los Angeles Tourism Marketing District is all those hotels within the city of LA who have a minimum of 50 guest rooms. They were formed about 8 and 9 years ago, and the goal was to backfill lost revenue because Los Angeles tourism used to receive 2 points of the 14% transient occupancy tax at hotels. During Mayor Han's administration, there was a major budget crisis, even more significant than what the city's currently contending with, and LA Tourism's funding was cut by half, from 2 points to 1 point of the TOT. So the Tourism Marketing District was formed, as you're probably aware. They have an assessment, not a tax, but it's 1.5% on room revenue. And over the last 9 years, the TMD has become our single largest funding source, very much on par with the TOT. So if you look at it, the balance is roughly 52% TMD, about 48% TOT. But the key here, and here is where I want to really recognize the leadership of Javier Cano as the chairman of the Tourism Marketing District, Carl Schuster from Wolfgang Puck Catering, who is our treasurer, and Patty McJennet. They collectively worked with the city of Los Angeles to ask for really an exception. And the point that was made is that even though a tourism marketing district is considered a business improvement district, it really is not like bids in the traditional sense, right? For those of you who are familiar with bids, if you have money left over at the end of the year, it means you overassessed, and you're supposed to remit that back to the payors. The business case that Patty and Javier and Carl and a number of others laid out was, look, in order for us to be one of the leading economic drivers in LA, we need to be able to set aside funds for future activities. And they were able to successfully make the business case that the TMD has the right to set aside reserve funds for 3 different categories of activities. One of them is major industry events. So a great example is we're going to be hosting IPW in 2024. That'll be phenomenal timing from a recovery standpoint. We know that it will probably involve $4 to $5 million in hosting costs for LA. And if you have to try and pay for that in the year for the year, what it means is you have to dramatically reduce your normal scope of programming. And that doesn't benefit us because we want to continue to maintain our competitive advantage and get the incremental benefit of IPW. The second category was mega sports and entertaining events. Think Super Bowl, think World Cup, think Olympic Games. Again, even though the host committees are responsible for those expenditures, there are significant expenses we incur as a destination to help promote that event, particularly in terms of featuring our culinary community, our arts and cultural community, et cetera. But the third category, thank goodness, was they had the foresight to say, we need to be able to set aside funds for catastrophic events. Now, I will say our definition of a catastrophic event has changed radically. Candidly, I think we were all thinking about some event that for 90 to 120 days disrupts business. Could be an earthquake, wildfire, God forbid, a terrorist attack, but something where we see a significant fall off in visitation for a period of maybe 60 to 90 days. None of us had anticipated a year-long global pandemic. But because the TMD Board of Directors had the leadership and the foresight to establish those reserve funds, we are quite literally one of only about half a dozen destinations across the entire country that will be able to have a significant reach and frequency in our advertising campaigns. What that means is, again, while a lot of other destinations will have to go dark because of financial necessity, we are one of only a handful of destinations who will be able to continually and actively promote the destination as we come through the recovery process. That's incredibly good news for everyone on this call. And as you saw in one of the previous slides, we have absolutely stolen market share during the recovery process. And we expect that that will continue as we start to see the long-haul domestic markets and the international markets return. I talked about international. One of the things that I think you all realize, LA tourism is very unique in this regard. And I can take absolutely zero credit for this. Patty McJennet is one of the people who's been instrumental in this over the years. Los Angeles is the only destination in the country that has our own offices and full-time staff internationally. Every other destination uses PR and marketing firms to represent them. Now, there's nothing wrong with that. We do that in some of our secondary markets, like Brazil, for example. But in our top international feeder markets, for over 2 decades, we have had our own staff and our own offices. So while yes, of financial necessity, we did have to reduce our staffing, we have maintained our licenses in every one of those key international feeder markets. That is going to give us a huge first mover advantage when we start to see the return of international air service, and there is tremendous pent-up demand from those international markets. So I think this is going to give us a huge competitive advantage. And one of the things I'll tell you is, even during this period where international visitors are not coming, the international team led by Kathy Smith has done a remarkable job of making sure we remain top of mind with the global travel trade, so that we're using this as an opportunity to make sure they're up to speed on product education. You may be familiar with our LA Insider Training Program for the travel trade, or our Angels Academy in China. We have brought tens of thousands of members of the travel trade through those training certification programs during the pandemic, so that when the time is right, they will be prepared to sell LA aggressively. I think it's also worth mentioning that on the sales side, Darren Green's team has done a remarkable job of staying front and center with our customers through virtual client events, through virtual trade shows, and they've done a remarkable job of retaining group business. In fact, we've actually retained 12 citywides that were on the books for 2021 by rebooking them for future dates. And we've actually secured almost 500,000 new room nights for future years on the sales side. But the last 2 things I want to talk about is, we can't lose sight of the fact that prior to the pandemic, we were coming off of 9 years of record growth at the destination. 9 years. And that was without all of the things that you see here. Starting in 2018 with Bank of California Stadium, this year with SoFi Stadium, and I have to tell you, I had the privilege of actually touring SoFi. You cannot believe it until you see it in person. It is really the world's premier global stadium, both in terms of sporting events, but if you think about it, there are only so many dates a year that are filled with professional sporting events. That gives us the ability to bid on pieces of business that we've never been able to historically. It's a tremendous asset. But if you look at this year, we're going to have the September opening of the Academy Museum of Motion Pictures. We're going to have the Midfield Satellite Concourse as part of LAX's complete renovation and modernization. And then if you look forward, Destination Crenshaw, the Lucas Museum, the LA experience is going to be more compelling than it has ever been. And as we come through the recovery process, I think that means, again, we will be better positioned than just about any other global destination. And then the last part of it is, I spoke about major events. I think you already know we have just an incredible string, really unprecedented, for the next decade of major global sporting events. And some of these you may not be aware of. So we actually are going to be hosting Major League Soccer's All-Star Game this year. Beyond that, you know, we're now only a year away from hosting the Super Bowl at SoFi Stadium. You may know that the Major League Baseball All-Star Game was supposed to take place in 2020. We've successfully re-secured that for 2022. I'm sure you're already aware of the College Football Playoff National Championship game, the US Open for golf out at the LA Country Club, but we also secured the West Regional Playoffs for the NCAA for 24. And then, as I said a moment ago, IPW in 2024, the World Cup in 26, and then certainly the granddaddy of them all, the Olympic and Paralympic Games in 28. One thing that I think is important as we talk about these major events, though, and I'm sure some of you have experienced this, as we're talking to our constituents and stakeholders, what I've noticed has been there's been a lot of focus on the Olympics. We've got to be ready for the Olympics. We've got to be ready for 28. I actually think we have a much shorter runway than that. Because if you look at these major events, the global spotlight is going to be on LA in a major way, starting with the Super Bowl next year. And almost every single year in the run-up to the Olympics, we are going to be having these major industry and sporting events. So anything we can do to advocate for the things that are going to help us move through the recovery process and create a positive guest experience, we can't wait till the Olympics. We've got to start now, because we're both very fortunate to have this major slate of events, but we have to be ready for it. So that's really a brief summary of why I think, despite the challenges that we've all experienced over the last year or so, and despite the fact that we still have a lot of heavy lifting to do, I think LA is poised to come through this better than just about any destination, not just nationally, but globally. And what I'd love to do is, spend the rest of the time opening it up to the group for any questions anyone might have, and really to thank all of you for your support, because, at the heart of it, LA Tourism is a nonprofit membership-based organization. We are a service organization. We exist to serve all of you and to support our local travel and tourism community. So just on behalf of everyone in our organization, I cannot thank all of you enough, because as Sarah said at the outset of this, the only way we get through this is together. And I cannot thank all of you enough for everything you've done to support our efforts over the last 9 months. So Sarah, with that, I'll open it up to you and for any questions the group may have.
Thank you so much, Adam, for taking the time to share some of your story with our community and provide us with some insights in 2021. We are running a little past time, but I think we have time for a couple questions. So if you guys want to submit them in the chat, feel free to do so if we get a couple, and then we'll take a few moments to wrap up. I know somebody did ask if they're able to access the video you shared. Is that on YouTube or something that you're able to share with our attendees?
Yeah, absolutely. We've pushed that out through our website, and we'll make a point of getting you the link to it so that you can go ahead and share it with everyone who would like to use it.
Wonderful, thank you. I guess I'll wait and pause for another minute and see if there's any questions. That was so much information and such great information. And I don't know, Adam, are you available? Do you want to put your contact, unless somebody wants to reach out to you personally?
Oh, of course. Always more than happy to. Let me put my information here in the chat to everyone. And, never hesitate to reach out to me or any member of our team, because, as I said, that's what we're there for. So here's my email, and I'm also going to give you my office number.
That's perfect. Thank you. I love how personable you are. And I think that that's, something that shows how important, this type of connection really is. Sometimes we feel that there's individuals we want to talk to that are intangible. And we hosted an event with Misty Kearns last year, and she had shared something about just, you have to reach out and ask. So definitely take the time to reach out to Adam. There's one question, and I'll ask this and then we'll wrap up. So Sarah from the aquarium asked, when will the drive time ads run after being paused?
Yeah, so that's a great question. So we're actually, and this is the great thing about the flexibility of the campaign that Don and his team developed, we're actually going to be going back in market for locals for our staycation initiative tomorrow. You may recall that LA Love is the local market promotion where we have over 100 special offers for members. And we know that, it's kind of the inverse of our normal marketing strategy. Normally we start with international, move into long haul domestic. Well, we know the recovery is going to start right here at home. So we go back in market tomorrow with the LA Love campaign for staycations. And then we're going to be back in market on March 1st with our drive markets.
Wonderful. Well, thank you again, Adam. And thank you to all of our members, our guests, the first-time attendees for joining us today. We hope that you all enjoyed our first virtual event of the year. I wanted to take a moment and say that we understand the situation that our industry is in, and we will continue to offer complimentary virtual programming until we are able to meet again in person. And while we recognize that not everyone is in a place to become a member, we are offering flexible payment plans and discounts. And if you have any issues and want to continue to participate, please reach out to myself or Misha. We welcome your communication and we want to support you. Please also keep an eye out for our next virtual event and stay in touch with us through our social outlets. And I'd like to end today's program with a couple of quotes that resonated personally to me by James Baldwin and Malcolm X in honor of Black History Month. Not everything that is faced can be changed, but nothing can be changed until it is faced. The future belongs to those who prepare for it today. Thank you again, and I hope you enjoy the rest of your day and the rest of your week and this wonderful weather that we have in LA while a lot of other states and cities are snowed in.
Yep.
And you guys can unmute yourself and say goodbye if you'd like.
Yeah, I have to go shovel right now. It's snowing in Chicago, so thank you.
The one thing I don't miss about my hometown, Mike.
Yeah, we've got quite a bit of snow here.
Well, I mean, our kids have been completely ruined. We actually took them on a trip to Dallas a couple of years ago in the winter, And they both took this thing off the back seat and held it up. And it was, you know, a piece of wood with a brush on one end and plastic on the other. And they said, "What's this?" And I said, if you've lived your whole life not knowing what it is to scrape a car, consider yourself fortunate.
So true. Thank you very much, everybody. Thank you.
Thanks, Sarah. So glad to be able to spend the time with everyone today.
Thank you, Adam.
Thank you, Adam.
Everyone, thank you.
Thanks.